all these techniques, when I teach people, they ask me, "Oh, I have read the book, which is on from an FBI investigator. Can I manipulate people from these techniques?" And I tell them no, because the FBI technique there is to maybe manipulate a criminal or somebody who is kidnapped someone
Yeah.
else. But here, you are not negotiating with the kidnapper. This is your cross-functional partner. You have a common organizational goal.
Yeah.
So learn these techniques not to manipulate people, but to be a collaborative leader.
Today's guest is Pramoda Vyasarao. He has more than 20 years of experience in big tech, in companies like Oracle and Meta, and he's now a leadership and communication coach. He's an author and runs a course called Communication Engineering, which is also the title of today's chat. With Pramoda, we will talk about what good communication looks like, especially for engineers and managers. So let's dive right into it after a short word from our sponsor. Chances are you know of engineering metrics programs that didn't get adopted or failed to deliver the promised productivity gains. But why? Because those metrics live in dashboards, and dashboards die on the vine. They were built for a purpose, then people just forget about them. Sleuth Pulse solves this by bringing metrics and people together and powering engineering reviews across your organization. Sprint reviews, monthly check-ins, and resource planning are all examples of common reviews in engineering teams that help you achieve alignment and successful execution. They are truly the best way to make metrics part of the workflow. So Sleuth uplevels them by bringing in quantitative and qualitative data, letting people add context, and using AI to summarize data and pick out outliers. Check out sleuth.io for more information. Hi, Pramoda. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
I am so excited to be here, Luca.
So, Pramoda, you have more than 20 years of experience in big tech, working at Oracle and Meta, and you're now a leadership and communication coach. You're an author, you have written a book, and you run a course called Communication Engineering, which is also the title we chose for today's chat. Because today I would love to talk about what good communication looks like, especially for engineers and managers. So, to break the ice, can you tell us more about yourself and your journey? So, how did you even go from engineering to coaching leaders about communication?
Yeah. I started my career as a junior engineer back in 2002 at Oracle. My biggest challenge back then was communication itself. One of the challenges was the language itself, English being my third language. I struggled to communicate and
Yeah.
share my ideas with people. Luckily, back then, I had Toastmasters Club at Oracle. My mentor said you should go attend those club meetings to become a better communicator. And that really changed my career trajectory. Because I had the exposure to better communication at Toastmasters, within 6 years of my career, I tried other things. I became a product manager from software engineer
Yeah.
and enterprise data architect later, and then entered into the engineering management roles. None of that would happen actually without the communication skills I developed during my career. So my
Wow.
career trajectory completely changed. It gave me new opportunities because I was ready. I was ready beyond my engineering skills to communicate, articulate ideas, both in writing and verbal communication.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it all started with the Toastmasters Club. Can you tell us more about this? Because many people in Europe, for example, don't know a lot
Mhm.
about this.
What is interesting, Luca, is this is close to 100-year-old club. So
Wow.
this was started in the year 1927 by Ralph Spetley in the US.
Mhm.
This idea of club is people come here to improve their communication, public speaking, and leadership skills.
Yeah.
Essentially, each club meeting is about 60 to 90 minutes. And there are three things that happen in each club meetings. One is called prepared speeches, where people come prepared on a topic. They speak for 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
And there is an evaluator who will look at the elements of a speech and they will give feedback on what was great about the speech content and the delivery, what could improve.
Yeah.
The second section is called a table topic section, where you will be given a topic, any random topic, like talk about new research on AI, And what if you were the president of United States? What would you do? All these impromptu topics, and you have to speak within 2 minutes, making sense about the topic.
Of course.
The last section is where there is evaluation. There is a role called grammarian who will look at various grammar structures and words being used, and they give feedback on what was great usage here, what could improve. They will not pick
Wow.
out people's names, but they will specify what was incorrect usage of a specific word or a phrase or a sentence, what's the
Yeah.
right usage.
Yeah.
This is a great forum to improve your speaking skill, English grammar, as well as communicating in public.
Yeah, because I mean the way you presented this is basically you get candid feedback about a lot of things by a lot of people,
Mhm,
probably an order of magnitude more feedback than what you would get from your teammates, who might shy away from telling you
mhm,
exactly what they think because they work with you.
mhm.
So you never get probably that kind of feedback at that level of detail in your team.
Yes, absolutely. Not only that, in addition to that is the background. If you attend any of the Toastmasters meeting, most likely you will meet people from different backgrounds, like accountant, doctors, business
Yeah,
owners,
true.
and so on. So this diversity of thought is also important. Same topic, but they come from different angles. They use different
Yes.
phrases to describe things. So by having more exposure to these ideas and phrases, your vocabulary improves, your bank of words improve. You have a different choice of words and phrases to describe the same thing.
Wow, that's so true. I mean, when you're surrounded by engineers, or
Mhm,
people from the same background, everybody talks the same way at some point, maybe, or use a very small set of words, a very small
mhm,
vocabulary. So, there is this cliche that engineers struggle with communication. I mean, that they're not good at advocating for what they want to do or at negotiating with other non-technical
mhm.
stakeholders, maybe. Do you think this is a myth or that's true in your experience?
In my experience, it is 100% true for a couple of reasons. One is the language itself. If you
Mm,
see the engineering community, a majority people are not, native speakers of English. Majority of
yeah,
them.
yeah,
You go there from Asia, other countries, they are not English-speaking folks. So I think that is the number one reason. I see that they may not have all the required tools to communicate well. They have ideas, they've got great thoughts, but they may not have the right structure to communicate that. That is
yeah,
one challenge. It is true in my career because I have managed teams in other countries like Argentina, India, where English is not the first language.
yeah,
They're extremely smart people. It's just that they don't know how to communicate well.
yeah,
So I think that's more of a structural challenge. The other one is people who are really good at communication. They know English, it's their first language, but they are bitten by this thing called the curse of knowledge.
hmm.
They have so much knowledge, deep knowledge and expertise about something, they think they're adding value by giving all the details.
Oh, okay, right.
So their natural tendency is I need to educate my stakeholders. They don't know all the details. So they stay at the basement of all these technology phrases where the other folks are not able to relate.
Yeah,
They think they're helping, but actually they're not helping by complicating the matter. The other person is saying, okay, what does it mean? Okay, you're telling me all these about database issues or these mid-tier issues or the web server issues. Like, what does it mean to me? I don't know anything
yes,
about this. I think these two are the gaps. One is the language gap itself. The second one is the curse of knowledge, where they think all the details matter to people. Those are the two challenges that are real in the industry, by the way.
yeah. So basically, they need, when it comes to the struggle that comes from knowledge, they need to be able to translate this, hard technical concepts in a way that speaks to what the other stakeholders want to hear about where the value is, what they care about. So this is what we're talking about.
Yes, we need to be able to explain complex ideas to a fifth grader.
Yeah,
If you can explain complex ideas to a fifth grader at age 11, you are a good communicator.
yeah,
No matter how complex the idea is, you have to find out analogies, find out examples, find out models, which is easy to translate and transfer it to the audience.
yeah. Totally agree, 100%. So you said that good communication was crucial for you to take on these different roles in your career. So you became a product manager and later got into management. So why was this important, and why is good communication important for engineers? You have already answered in part by talking about these things, but how was important for you?
I would say two dimensions. One I want to go is my own impact. As I improved my communication skill, both verbal and written, I could see that I was impacting more in meetings, in documents I was writing, in negotiations, in influencing people, in listening well to them, because there is a component of listening also to communication.
Yeah,
I could clearly see my impact was increasing. It
yeah,
was evident in all the meetings, emails, everywhere. The second aspect, Luca, is my own career opportunities. I have a master's degree in computer science. When I joined Oracle in 2002, I thought I would retire as an engineer. I had no idea. Back then, there was no career track for ICs. Today, it's much better. You can have a VP level IC title today in many companies, which is great. In 2002, that was not the case. We had something called as project lead. And after that, there was no title for ICs. You had to become a manager, people manager.
yes,
I'm talking about 2002.
yeah,
Now, at that age, I was wondering, what is my career going to be if I don't improve? As I improved, it opened so many career opportunities. Imagine somebody who was a core engineer, software engineer, within about 5 years, I had an opportunity to become a product manager in the organization, which is internal transfer within the organization.
yes,
Then from there, I became an enterprise data architect, looking at the holistic view of CRM, ERP, and support systems, and bringing data together for a 360 view of customers at Oracle.
yeah,
None of these would have happened in my career without those communication skills in oral as well as written communication. It just
yeah.
opened new opportunities for me.
So the those skills are the ones that allow you to bridge these gaps, basically between, for example, you're an engineer, you want to jump into different things, and you may discover
Mhm,
that if you're a good communicator, the gap between these different roles is not that big. Probably you can take on these things, and
mhm.
it becomes easier for you.
That is correct. Once you communicate well, you start of thinking that, okay, you can actually think like a product manager. Now you're in different meetings, you get different perspectives of the product.
Yeah,
So which
yeah,
is what
love this.
gives you confidence that if you can communicate well with a product manager or a business person in sales and finance or marketing, you want to solve bigger problems now. They're not
Yeah.
necessarily solved through coding, but they're solved through decision making, through communicating, through resolving matters at business level.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. So let's get into the details of this because I know you ran this course about communication engineering, and the course goes through 4 modules, which together make for what you call the TAL framework, that stands for talking, asking, listening, and leadership. So walk me through this.
This is something I put together after about 20 years of working in the industry and always watching people, learning as a practitioner, and then coaching, teaching for about 17 years.
Yeah,
My thought process behind this, Luca, was how do I create a course which is applicable to people on the same day, in the sense they watch me speak, they get some ideas, and they can apply it tomorrow morning at work. So that was my thinking as I created this course. Something practical people can apply right away, applicable in their meetings. And I started with what is the first thing people need to change. From my experience, is this is research backed, by the way. My work on this whole framework is based on so many research scientists, including Olivia Fox Cabane, who wrote the book The Charisma Myth. She wrote a book called The Charisma Myth, like how everybody can be charismatic. And I took some ideas from the book in my career, which is essentially the first aspect of this is you have to be more intentional about your pauses when you're communicating. This one thing, if all of us can include this one thing in communicating, whether it is a group meeting or one to one, it can significantly level up our communication. We become more thoughtful, more engaging, we understand better. The people who are listening to us will understand better. Just tiny change. It's not easy to do, by the way. It's easy to communicate, okay, pauses are important, but it's not easy because we have habits. In the course, I bring back, we have a lot of exercises where people go to breakout rooms and practice pausing and not talking. That's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah. Love that you start really with the basics. So pauses, I guess, stop words, filler words. I mean, whatever
Mhm.
can be classified as pauses and similar things. And so how do you suggest to practice this? It's like, you can record yourself and watch you back or join meetups. How would you suggest to get better at this?
The easiest thing, I'm going to tell this to you for people who actually have teams, who work in teams. The easiest way to change your behavior is work with your team and say, I'm going to give a presentation today, maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Mhm.
I want you to watch my presentation and count the number of fillers I use. Fillers simply mean non-words. Any sound or any phrases like, essentially, basically, one or two are okay. But if you use too many of them, they affect your clarity and your fluency.
Yes.
Just by this exercise, teams getting together and say, today I will explain about this backend API or this database or this front end component. If they simply explain it for 5 minutes and the team members capturing the number of fillers they used, can significantly change their style of speaking.
Wow. Anyway, just for so you know, you have primed me now on this, and for the rest of this chat, I will be thinking if I'm adding too many stop words and fillers, and if I'm leaving enough pauses in my questions. Uh, so, do you think that is this something that people improve fast? How hard it is. Is it something that takes years to master, or is it just a matter that once you're more intentional about that, uh, it's you find that it's easy to get better?
Yeah. I'll give you an analogy, Luca, to think. Let's say you're watching a horror movie. You're in the
Yeah.
theater, you're watching a horror movie. You are totally engrossed in the movie, you are involved in the movie. You are actually feeling all the emotions while watching the movie. While you're watching it, somebody comes next to you and taps on your shoulder, hey, it's a movie. All of a sudden, your emotions will drop because you think now, oh, it's a reality, it's not a real thing, it's a movie.
Yeah.
That is called awareness. The moment people who are listening to this, they understand that pause is important, I need to be intentional, they have a new awareness.
Yeah.
If you can keep this awareness wherever you go, whenever you speak with people, you can change today. In the next 10 minutes, you can change. In the next interaction, you can change. Change is not difficult. You can start changing now. It's a process, it never ends.
Love this. Love this. And you say to do this with your team. So you give presentations, you ask feedback to your teammates, and maybe you do things together. Then everybody takes turns, and you can improve very fast on this thanks to this awareness. And I
Mhm.
can really relate on this, maybe not specifically on stop words, but I remember when I started the podcast, it was just a few months ago. Before that, I never really did anything on video or audio for what it matters. And I remember listening and watching me back, the first times. The feeling was awful, of course. I know this is a cliche, nobody likes to hear himself back, but you realize so many things about the way you speak that you would never otherwise. So, can totally relate.
Yeah. One thing I learned, Luca, is this is through my mentors. I've learned that whenever we watch our own video of any performance, we are looking from the lens of evaluation, judgment.
Hmm.
Whereas other people who are going to listen to this podcast, they are not looking through the lens of judgment. They are looking through the lens of information. They want to gather something from this episode.
Yeah.
This is where the difference of information versus the evaluation. So most
Yeah.
of us, when we watch our own video, we have to drop the lens of too much evaluation and judging that, oh, I'm not good enough. I could have been better here. Yes, there are some good things you can learn, you can improve. At the same time, don't make it a trigger to feel bad about yourself. that does not help.
Love this take. Thank you. I think you're really right, and it's so easy to get too much, judgmental against ourselves when you're still delivering a lot of value, for example, for your audience, even if you're not perfect, even if you have an accent, because it's not your native language, and so it's easy to get discouraged because of our own uh, too high ambitions, basically, that work against us sometimes. So this was the first module. The first part is about talking, right? And then
Mhm.
you encourage about doing better on asking as well. How does it work?
The second skill we teach in the course is how to ask the right questions in the right way. Because I have seen in my career, including me as an engineer back then, I used to ask questions that were mostly closed questions.
Hmm.
Closed questions are the questions that only have yes or no as the answer, like binary answer. Have you tried this? Did you try this? Those are all closed questions. That doesn't make people think.
Hmm.
The second mistake I did, and I have seen many people do, is there is an attitude of interrogation when you ask questions.
Hmm.
You can have the attitude of empathy, inquiry, or the attitude of judgment or interrogation, like as if you're a cop questioning other people. So that is one
Very
thing I
interesting.
recommend people changing, because you have to bring the curiosity, empathy when you ask questions. That is the mindset of asking questions. The tone of voice, how do you ask? How do you bring that curiosity element? That's the one element we bring. The second element is what questions to ask. Once we covered how to ask questions, what questions to ask? I teach a framework called 4WH, which is who, what, when, where, and how. 4WH. These 5 questions are good enough for every conversation. You can peel the onion by asking these questions to dig more and more information, understand others' perspective through these open-ended questions. 4WH.
Yeah. Why do you, I want to go back 1 minute about on the first thing that you said. So closed questions versus open questions. Why do you think we default more to closed questions, and why do you think open questions are better for good communication?
The number one reason people don't ask open questions is they're not trained. We are
Hmm.
not trained in communication and the way humans think and how we communicate. If we all get proper training on when you communicate with somebody, how they think, how they respond is based on what's happening in their mind, then you will ask better questions.
Okay, that's
I'll
interesting.
give you one book, which is Your Brain at Work by David Rock, Your Brain at Work. In that book, he has a picture between manager and employee. There is a conversation. The
Hmm.
employee comes to the meeting and the employee talks about the problem on the table. So the employee is looking at the problem on the table, whereas a leader who is well trained, this person is looking at the thinking of the another person. In the sense, I will not talk about the topic, but I'll talk about your thinking now.
Okay, that's
So
very
this
interesting.
changed my perspective as a manager that, okay, I need to start thinking about how people approach problems. How do they approach a situation? What's their mindset? You can know their mindset only by asking open-ended questions.
Yeah, and I think that relates well to the second part of your answer before that, when you said to approach questions and topics
Mhm.
from a place of curiosity rather than judgment. Because I think when you ask a closed question, in a way, you have already, like the word suggests, closed the options, while instead, when you're curious, genuinely curious,
Mhm.
you're more likely to embrace whatever the other person could answer about that, and so ask a question that is more open about that.
Yes. When you ask open questions, what happens is people will explain their reasoning to you.
Hmm.
I think these 3 are important, and hence I made a decision, which is this. They will explain, they'll give you the footprints, how they came to a decision or an action.
Okay.
With closed questions, they will not be able to do it. They'll simply say yes or no, but they will not tell you why I came to this conclusion. What evidence led me to this conclusion or this decision?
Yeah. So when you say be curious instead of being judgmental, for example, when you ask a question, is it just a matter of phrasing the question in a different way, and then from a format point of view, let's call it like that, or you should ask different questions altogether, approach problems from a different perspective. So it's about meaning. I don't know if you can make examples maybe on this.
Yeah, let's take an example. If somebody makes a decision on using technology A versus technology B
Yeah.
for solving a problem,
Okay.
and let's say you were the manager, you could simply ask an open-ended question: what's the rationale behind your decision?
Okay.
Or what's the reasoning for making this choice versus that choice? Now, look at the question here. I am believing that you have a reason. You have a reason, a strong rationale for making that choice for technology. Explain to me what's the rationale behind that choice.
Yeah.
This is much better than asking, why did you make the decision?
Yeah.
Right?
Which in a way instead implies that maybe you have already your own judgment about
Mm-hmm.
that decision. Maybe you do not agree 100%,
Mm-hmm.
but in that case, instead, the best course of action is you restrain yourself from
Mm-hmm.
expressing that. You can't help but thinking about that, but you do not show that, and you explore this thing from a place of curiosity instead. Why?
Mm-hmm.
What's walk me through your thought process about this, for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Yeah. It also demonstrates trust, because the moment you say, what's the rationale behind this, to the other person, it gives a hint that they trust your judgment. They want you to explain the judgment, your process,
Yeah,
what went through, which came to this decision.
yeah,
That is such a better way of asking question and clarifying the process, as opposed to giving my opinion or judgment.
yeah. 100% agree. So before, when we were talking about the talking part, you said, let's practice with your teammates. You count the number of stop words, for example, that you use, and it's very
Mm-hmm.
practical and it's easy to develop that awareness that you explained before. But how do you practice this in a way that you know that you're getting better and that you can, I wouldn't say measure, but understand that you're doing a better job at this?
If possible, if it is really possible, I recommend starting a club like Toastmasters Club, if
Yeah.
it's possible in the organization. In fact, even when I was a director of engineering at Oracle, I used to attend meetings every week and deliver speeches. The reason I did that was I wanted to lead by example. If I were the director of a group with 75 people in the organization, I would go deliver speeches. And my speeches were evaluated by other ICs in the organization. Imagine the safety in the team, psychological safety, that I make mistakes in communication and somebody gives me feedback openly.
Yeah.
I think if possible, create that culture where it's okay to make mistakes, okay to learn from each other. Nobody is an expert.
Yeah.
And if you are a leader, I want you to lead by example. You cannot say your team should run these club meetings. You should be there as a participant, communicate. You don't have to lead the meetings, because then it becomes top down. Let people do this, ICs. You need to be there to show that it is important. Communication skills are important, and you need to
Yeah.
practice as well.
Yeah.
If that is not realistic for any reason, if it is not realistic, we can go back to the basics earlier, like each team meeting. We can say we only have 1 minute or 2 minutes. You have to communicate this in the next 2 minutes, each person.
Yeah.
And you can learn various structures to communicate. One structure I teach in my course is three-part structure: what, so what, and now what.
Yeah.
So, what is the matter here in 2 or 3 lines? So what? Like, why does it matter to the team? Now what? What action are you recommending us to take? By doing this, by default, everybody starts thinking in a structure. They will finish their communication within 2 minutes. They will not take more than 2 minutes. You can play games in the team and say, in this team meeting today, all of us are going to give updates in this structure, either situation, complication, and resolution, which is a consulting
Yeah.
communication model, or you can say, I'll use what and so what and now what.
Yeah.
You're gently bringing these structures in team meetings for people to learn practice, and make mistakes. Totally okay.
Yeah. So this is an interesting topic because, as you know better than me, there are so many frameworks out there about structuring, how to express this or that concept or situation. I'm From what you're saying, what I'm getting is that basically it doesn't matter probably what specific framework for structuring your ideas you use, as long as you use one. You're intentional about structuring the things you say. Am I right?
Yes, I agree. I'll give you one more picture to think about this. It is like walking from the circumference of the circle to the center of the circle. You can walk from anywhere you want, any framework is acceptable, but use
Yeah.
something to go to the center of your communication, be clear, authentic, and be short and concise.
Yeah. Love this. I agree. And also, you suggested both in this case and in the previous part about talking to create this kind of ceremonies in your team where you present things, you do small talks, or if you're able to, you start your own branch of the Toastmasters Club. So, do you
Mhm.
think is it better to practice these themes in this, how can I say, closed environment, that is detached from the main train of work first, as opposed to just learn on the job by changing, I don't know, how your sprint planning works or your retrospective works, maybe to begin with, and then you bring the learning on the job later. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree with you. You gave the answer, Luca. I suggest practicing these in low stake situations.
Mm,
Maybe one-on-one meeting with your manager or a stakeholder or a peer in engineering team. Start small and see how these things are impacting.
yeah.
If possible, get feedback from people and say, this meeting, I'm deliberately avoiding more fillers and adding pauses. Tell me how I communicated in that meeting.
Yeah.
Start small. That's really important. The other thing I also recommend is sometimes you go to meetings where there are 15, 20 people. It's a big group meeting. And what I recommend to my clients, one-on-one coaching clients, is especially on communication, there will be a question to you. Depending on your level, there might be one question coming to you. The best way for you to answer that question is make a note on your notepad. Okay, I'm going to use this structure. You can say one thing or two things or three things. It's called listicle structure.
Mhm.
Or you can use SCR, any structure, doesn't matter. You write down points and say, I'm going to talk about these three things. When the question comes to you, you simply follow the same trail of thoughts to communicate your answer.
Hmm.
What
That's
happens
nice.
now is all of a sudden you have like a well prepared speech. It's not a real speech, but you have the clear milestones in your journey. You want to cover those 3 points in 1 minute.
Yeah.
You can ask feedback later and say, hey, I gave you a quick update in that meeting. There were 20 people. How do you think? Was my voice confident? Was I coming across clear? Was I short enough to communicate that? Did I miss anything? Was there a gap? You can ask this to your peers, your functional partners, or your manager.
Yeah. Love this. And it also allows me to ask, what's the role of written communication in these cases? That is, uh, do you think people should use written docs like agendas for meetings and for uh, presentations altogether that might be shared in advance to help themselves at delivering the concepts in a better way? That they should prepare the talk in advance and share it in advance with the attendees of the meeting. What's the best practice here, if or examples that you can make?
Is this for presentation or team discussion? This specific question.
Let's talk about team discussions, for example.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the frameworks for team discussion I teach and I've used for years is called GROW model. Have you heard of GROW model?
No.
GROW. This comes from the world of coaching. The originator of this model is Sir John Whitmore in the UK,
Hmm.
where he was a coach and very famous. He wrote a book called Coaching for Performance.
Hmm.
The acronym stands for four words: GROW, goal, reality, options, and willingness.
Okay.
Goal, reality, options, and willingness. Think of this way. If you are a manager and you teach everybody in your team, let's use this framework for all discussions and probably to documents. In G section, which is goal, you write the goal. What's our goal? In clear terms, you write the goal. In reality, you start writing, where are we right now? We have the goal, which is to reach there. And in reality section, you write down all the situation currently, like where are you right now? In O, you explore all the options possible. No options left out of the table. Everything is added to the document with pros and cons. And here is what I think is happening. Then you go to willingness and say, what are we willing to do as a team? You can use this for discussions, documents, coaching conversations with people as a manager. This is a nice framework for any guided conversation. Goal, reality, options, and willingness.
Love this. I mean, I'm a framework person. I love structured thinking. I'm taking so many notes in this chat. So thank you for this. So this was asking for the asking part. And I asked myself a lot of questions to you about that. The next part is listening, which I guess is listening mindfully, right, in conversations. So what's your advice on this?
The first thing I cover in the course, Luca, is we look at the bottlenecks of listening. Like why people don't listen, we discuss that. There are two main things why people don't listen. One is we are distracted by devices like cell phone or sometimes looking at the laptop screen. We do deliberate actions to remove those distractions from our discussion. The second reason is we all are creatures of thoughts. We are constantly thinking, and there is a mental chatter going on while I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
By being more intentional, by pausing, I teach some breath work, so they actually can take slow, deep breaths as they're listening. So they not only listen to words, but they listen to emotions of people. If you're charged emotionally and you're angry at me or upset or frustrated, I teach how to find those emotions, how to listen to those emotions while people are talking. This
That's
helps them
interesting.
understand, okay, this is not a regular conversation, this is emotional conversation. There is emotion behind this discussion. You need to separate logic and emotion. Otherwise, if you hit everything by logic, it doesn't help. You need to separate them and say, is this a logical discussion here or is there any emotion behind this logic?
That's very interesting. So it's not about leaving emotions out completely because emotions are useful to get to an agreement, to understand the other person, but you should be intentional and understand the difference between maybe your emotional argument and the logical one. So how do you take both into account? How do you find middle ground and how do you separate it?
Yeah. I teach a framework called 4F. This is called how people take action. It's also called the path to action. I'll lay down the 4 steps here. The first one is facts. All of us see facts around us. By seeing facts, we have a story in our head, which is the fiction. So, fact, we see the fact, there is a story in your head called fiction, and that fiction triggers feelings in you. That's the third F, feelings. And feelings trigger you to take fierce action or committed action toward a specific goal. So, facts, fiction, feelings, and fierce action. In terms of any discussion, especially difficult conversations, people having emotional discussion and perspective differences, it is always the second step that is challenging, which is the fiction or the story I am telling about you or the situation. I jump to feelings and action. I feel angry, agitated, frustrated. I think my approach is the better approach. You're not listening to me. I have all these stories. And I may interrupt you in meetings. I may raise my voice. Many things can happen, right? We are emotional creatures. We are triggered by emotions. But if you and I, being cross-functional partners or leaders in organizations or manager-employee situation, if we both go back to the story here, what is the story I have in my mind for this situation? What is your story or your fiction about the situation?
Yeah.
If we both share our stories, I am perceiving this way and hence I'm feeling this feeling. And if you tell me your perspective and say, I'm seeing this way, and that is triggering me these feelings, we have a better conversation, a better outcome of the conversation.
Love this. So walk me through how to use it. Let's say that you and I have an argument about something we do not agree on, and we want to find middle ground and figure out uh, where the truth is, or converge on some kind of outcome. So how do you use the framework? Do you go through the various steps, starting from the facts, going through the fiction, and comparing our respective versions of the various Fs?
Yeah, I'll give you one example. This was back in the day. I'll take a technical example where someone was, some partner team, they were writing all these backend scripts, and everything was in Java, and it was hitting the database in a wrong way, running wrong queries, and it was affecting our database performance.
Yeah.
Now, if they are customers of database, which is commercially managed database like Oracle, there is a concept of stored procedures in Oracle where it makes logical sense. In that case specifically, in that case, it made logical sense to move the scripts to stored procedure as opposed to doing this in JavaScript.
Yes.
Now, for this, the story I have to narrate is start with my story and say, based on what I have seen, this situation calls for using stored procedure at Oracle database. And I see that your team is running all these queries in Java. I would like to know what's the rationale behind this. What are your constraints? What is the story that you have to tell me why you made that choice?
So
And I
first of
simply
all,
keep quiet.
the open question first.
Yeah, yeah. And I listen to them and understand what was the reason they're doing this. I could be going to judgment mode immediately and saying, okay, this is a common sense. Have you read articles on the internet?
Yeah.
This is a classic case for stored procedures, not for APIs doing the backend work, meaning large transactions database. Now, instead of attacking him, I went by explain to me your rationale.
Yeah.
And he explained the rationale. He said, I have no one who knows that level of expertise in Oracle database and scripts. Oracle has its own language, PLSQL, database scripting language, and his team had no skill in that language. That's how you peel the onion. You say, here is what I have learned so far. I've got some facts. Here is my story. This is not the right situation for using this particular language. What is your story? Where are you coming from?
Yeah.
Then they'll explain to you what is their background. And when they explain, you use the other skill I call as amping up your listening skill. AMP is an acronym. Ask, mirror, paraphrase, and prime. AMPP. Ask, mirror, paraphrase, and prime. You ask more questions, open-ended questions. Oh, tell me more about this. What happened? And what's the reason for not hiring people? Is this something budget issue or many things, right? I can ask more questions. I can paraphrase. I can say, let me summarize so far. You said these things. Let me summarize 3 things I learned from our conversation so far. And I genuinely feedback and say, I learned these 3 things about your team not having the right skills. So it is never about the argument which is right. He just
Yeah.
doesn't have the right skills on his team. You see how
Yeah.
things are going now? If I
Yes.
had judgment that he doesn't know what he's doing,
Yeah.
that's going to take me in a wrong direction.
Yeah.
But coming to my story and his story, his situation through AMPP, I now know his constraints, his reality, his story.
Yeah. Love this. And coming back to the fact versus the fiction that you build in your mind versus the feelings that are associated with that, feels to me that you ask more questions at the beginning and kind of delay the moment where you create some fiction in your head to interpret those facts. Am I right?
Yes, you brought a good point. The other most important thing is this has to be done with an open mindset. All these techniques, when I teach people, they ask me, "Oh, I have read the book which is on from an FBI investigator. Can I manipulate people from these techniques?" And I tell them no, because the FBI technique there is to maybe manipulate a criminal or somebody who has kidnapped someone
Yeah.
else. But here, you are not negotiating with the kidnapper. This is your cross-functional partner. You have a common organizational goal.
Yeah.
So learn these techniques not to manipulate people, but to be a collaborative leader,
Yeah, funny
which
story. I
means,
read I read that book too, and I was never able, to be honest, to
yeah,
apply those ideas in a workplace. So can
yeah.
relate.
I don't like the aspect of manipulating. What's the reason to manipulate? We have a common goal. The organization has to win together. It's not me or you.
Yeah,
You have to rise above all these personal wins and look at what does the organization need right now. What's the win for the organization? Then you go at a higher level of plane, become a more mindful leader.
yeah. And I love this. And what about the feelings part? So let's say you made an example that is great, but in a way, it's an example where you were able to communicate well from the start, right? While instead there are many situations in teams where some argument escalates to a point where feelings are definitely involved. So you have to de-escalate. And so how do you get back from probably from feelings to the fiction to the facts, underline and find middle ground?
Number one thing, if you are a leader or if you want to grow as a leader, I really recommend developing mindfulness. If you like, you can call the word meditation, but I call thought awareness. You need to be aware of how you are thinking, how your mental chatter is disturbing you. Your mental chatter is always making the other person a villain and you are a hero. You can
Yeah,
meditate a few minutes every day. You can take deep breaths. Be aware of your own emotions. Understand that we are all emotional creatures. Acknowledge that you have emotions and they have emotions. So, first step is become aware of your own emotion and do not be hijacked by emotions. That's my number one tip for people. You need to do anything journaling, meditation, breath work, a nature walk. You decide your way. And if you don't like the word meditation, don't call it meditation. No problem. There is nothing spiritual about it. You can simply watch your thoughts. It's called thought awareness.
yeah,
Second aspect is become aware that people come with emotions and it's okay. People come with emotions. In fact, there are meetings where people strongly say something. You can just by their tone of voice, the way
yeah,
they speak, you know it's emotionally charged conversation. By simply saying, "Wow, I hear a lot of passion behind what you said," you're acknowledging that in this room there is a strong emotion to be discussed. You're not saying it is good or bad. You're simply saying, wow, Luca, I hear a lot of passion behind what you said. I hear a
yeah,
lot of emotion in what you said. Now you're opening up the conversation. Let's talk about your emotion. Like, what are you going through right now?
yeah. So you recommend to talk through it. I mean, not to try to ignore the emotional side, but rather to talk through it together.
Yes. You label and say, yes, I'm currently upset because I was expecting A, but B is happening right now. This affects my team and my priorities. You can openly share, especially in one to one conversation. I'm not saying really group conversations. Uh,
Yeah,
I know we need to be mature to ensure all these emotional discussions are in one to one conversation. You resolve them in one to one discussions before you go to group meetings.
yeah,
This is totally okay. It is recommended. A lot of people say, oh, you should not be vulnerable. You should not share your emotion, which is totally incorrect. The more open you are and say, hey, I'm a bit frustrated here. I'm not feeling good about this decision we made. I'm concerned about the outcome in next 12 months. Those bring really authentic conversations.
yeah. I
They
agree.
build stronger relationships.
Yeah, I agree. And uh, I also think that when you come out and say, I feel frustrated from this is like an objective reality that cannot be
Mhm.
countered. You know, it's your feeling, so it kind of belongs to the fact section. You know,
Mhm.
and you have to address it as a fact, not
Yeah.
putting the blame on the other person. That's not the
Mhm.
point, but it's one of the cards that is on the table, basically.
Mhm. And sometimes, we are all human beings. We can have these common agreements within leaders and say, hey, sometimes I may go below the line and complain about something, but I'm simply venting out. I'm simply
Yes.
sharing what I feel right now. And that's okay too. You can say, probably I might go below the line for the next 30 seconds and complain, but don't take it wrong.
Yeah.
That's okay. You're simply sharing, let's say you joined a new organization and change is difficult in that organization. You can say, boy, This is what I'm feeling right now. So difficult to change things here. What do you think about this?
Yeah, love this. So my personal takeaways from this are: first, develop mindfulness and self-awareness, so you recognize your own emotions and don't get hijacked, let's say, by them in conversations. But it's not that you have to ignore them in conversations. You bring them up front if they are an important part of this argument, of this conversation, and you discuss them openly. I think this is fantastic advice. And then we have the final part of the framework, which is leadership, right? The second L of tall. So what's your advice on this?
A lot of people, especially managers, give feedback to their team members. I want you to become a leader, become influential, develop influencing skills, and so on. But they don't necessarily tell them how.
Mm,
I had the same challenge. Luckily for me, I worked with many mentors and coaches. Some of them were pro bono mentors. They wanted to help me. Some were paid coaches. I paid them money to coach me. If you ever work with a coach, my strong recommendation is start early. You don't have to wait to become a manager to hire a coach. There are amazing coaches available these days. Work with them on how you show up as a leader. Working with a coach is the highest form of changing yourself as a person. And I strongly admire you. If you already have a coach, kudos to you. You have the humility to get help and the courage to change yourself. So, number one is work with a coach because there are so many books, there are so many courses. They will give you wonderful ideas, but
yeah,
there is no accountability for changes.
yes,
When you work with a coach for 6 or 12 or 18 months, now you have a strong accountability to change.
yes,
So they know exactly how to measure changes. All of these can be done in a methodical fashion. So for leadership development, I strongly recommend work with a coach. If you cannot, if for any reason it's financial constraints or your company is not reimbursing these coaching charges, the other recommendation I have is pick the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. That book by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith has everything you need for leadership development. I am a big fan of Marshall. In fact, he endorsed my book as well. If you remember the book
love
cover,
this. Yes,
Goldsmith endorsed my book. His book has everything you need for leadership development. I recommend two books. One is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. The second one is Mojo.
hmm.
Mojo is the second word. If you read these two books and apply everything you learn from these two books, your leadership can change within 12 months. Within 18 months, you can totally transform yourself as a collaborative leader.
Love this. Love the advice. And I especially loved the advice about coaching because I think coaching is totally normal in other areas of our life, like, sports and fitness and other things, while instead is still feels to me like an underdeveloped space in business. It's not commonplace for managers to get regular coaching on their
Mhm.
job. And I agree with you that it's not much about the knowledge itself that you can get from a
Mhm.
lot of books these days, but it's the momentum and the accountability, the fact that being engaged with another person drives you forward. So, why do you think is not more common to get professional coaching for managers and leaders?
I,
If you agree, of course.
I agree. I totally agree, especially in the technology world. I know if you look at the product management space, I see a lot of people really advocating that, hey, you need to get a coach early in
True.
your career. But engineering, I haven't seen yet. My hypothesis, Luca, is the way engineers become managers. I think that's where the gap is.
Hmm.
Usually in industries, what I have seen is they take the highest performing engineer. The
Yeah.
team needs a manager right now, they make them managers.
Yeah.
When they make them managers, they don't get proper training on what does it mean to become a manager? What does
Yeah.
it mean by coaching? And how does it
Yes.
differ from mentoring? In my experience, that is the gap. When people become managers, they don't have good training on what does it mean. You have to you have to become someone else now. Your behaviors need to change. You're no longer an expert in technology and solving problems yourself. Your job is to multiply people's impact.
Yes.
That attitude has to be brought as soon as possible. Otherwise, it's challenging as they grow. See, think of this. A manager keeps doing well in their technical field. They become a senior manager because the organization is growing. Nowhere in the process they ever had a coach. They don't know what it
Yes.
means by accepting mistakes, having difficult conversations, letting people go with respect and empathy. They don't know any of these skills.
Yeah.
Not their fault. The organization did not plan to train these people.
Yes. And also, let's make a distinction because coaching, as in professional coaching, is a different thing from mentoring, from get mentorship from a peer or a superior in your company or from another company, right? Because I think many people conflate the two things and think that they can speak maybe regularly, informally with somebody in their company that can mentor them on the job, but it's different from professional coaching, right?
Absolutely. Think of this way. One word for mentors is instructions. They give you instructions on achieving something they have achieved. For example, you are a CTO. You can mentor somebody to become a CTO.
Yeah,
Whereas a coach is somebody who is more into inquiry,
yeah,
who will ask you great questions to look at what is the limiting factor in your mind, what beliefs are holding you back, what are the thoughts that are limiting you, how do you relate with people, what are you hiding from people. Coaches are experts in human behavior, human thinking, habits, and how we relate with people.
yeah,
So the skills are totally different for mentors and coaches. People mix these two up. That is causing a lot of confusion in the industry. They are two different things. For example, my coach is Dr. Eric Maisel. He is 77. He wrote about 67 books. He's my coach. He has no software engineering background. He was a psychotherapist for 40 years. He's a family therapist. He wrote 60, 70 books,
yeah,
and he's a business coach for me right now.
yeah.
So that's the difference between a mentor and a coach.
Yeah, it's really it's universal skills. We have a book club in the community, and a few months ago we read The $1 Trillion Coach, which is the story of Bill Campbell,
Oh.
who coached the likes of Steve Jobs, Larry Page, and many others, and he was a football coach. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
had nothing to do with technology for the most of his life. So,
Mm-hmm.
so it's very fascinating, and it shows that at the end, a lot of the topics that we discussed
Mm-hmm.
about communication, about leadership, we said at the beginning that it makes it easier maybe to go from I don't know engineering to product management, but it goes way beyond that. I think there are really some fundamental and core skills that apply to everything we do. I think.
Absolutely. You can think of this way. You can express yourself better with better communication.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
when you express yourself better, you can do many other things. Maybe you can become an author, you can become a speaker, you can write books, you can teach courses. All of a sudden, your skill sets are broad now. You have more avenues to shine and express yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So I know we are running out of time, but I want to keep a few minutes at the end to give you the opportunity to tell us more about your book and about the course that you have, because these ideas, these concepts are really awesome. So if there is anything that you would like the listeners to know about you and what you're doing, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you for giving the opportunity. One is you can go to Amazon. My book is available beyond your limits. It is available in all formats, including audio. You can find the book on Spotify. You can listen to the audiobook on Spotify. This is an inspiring guide for you to set goals and achieve them. They can be personal goals or professional goals. If you're looking for inspiration and goal setting, you can read that book. I talk about many of my books as an engineer, all the way to writing a book at the end. So you will love the book. The second place is you can go to LinkedIn, follow me. I post valuable content on leadership and goal setting at least 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. You can follow me on LinkedIn. And lastly, I have got a digital course as well as a live course called Communication Engineering. I will send the links to Luca. He can add to the show notes. You can look at the digital course. It is about a 3 hour course where I cover all the ideas about communication, various strategies, and some examples of mock conversations with people, audio conversations. It is like packed with so many ideas you can apply tomorrow at work. Some of you may be interested in coming to my live course. I conduct twice a year on Maven, the communication engineering course. You can add yourself to the wait list there and come to the next course in 2025. I just finished the course yesterday, so the next one will be in 2025. But 80% people love the digital course because they watch as a team. Sometimes they invite me as a speaker after they watch as a team. They invite me as a speaker to conduct these practice sessions.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is start with the digital course. You will really enjoy and start applying that. One thing I also tell you is that life can be really different. You don't have to box yourself in one role. Once you become a better communicator, there are so many opportunities in life. And I am really living it right now in the last 18 months.
Love this. Thank you so much, Pramoda. I will add everything to the show notes. Thank you again for coming on the show, and thank you for this great chat.
I loved it. Thank you so much for inviting me, Luca.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.